On the last night of 2011, US has signed some of the toughest sanctions against Iran. These are targeting the oil sector of Iran as well as the financial institutions of any other country that are dealing with the Central Bank of Iran. Financial institutions that do business with the Iranian Central Bank will be barred from operations in the US, and not many countries are able to risk exclusion from the world's largest economy or angering its only superpower. This has led to a scramble by countries around the globe who import Iranian oil to either find an alternative oil supplier or negotiate with Washington for a waiver from the sanctions. PoliTact's senior analyst Cosima Brand has been monitoring the situation in the Middle East and the sanctions on Iran, especially the international reaction to these sanctions. She will be joining us via Skype. Welcome, Cosima.
Thank you.
What has been the international reactions to these sanctions, especially what are China and Russia saying about these tough sanctions?
Okay, so both China and Russia have announced their opposition to the sanctions. China was particularly angered by the fact that these sanctions, which have far-reaching implications for many countries, were enacted unilaterally by the US. They feel that it is a gross interference in other countries' foreign affairs. They feel that the US is placing its domestic law above international law. Interestingly, however, this month China has cut its oil order almost in half to Iran. Speculators are saying that this is actually more of a move to let the sanctions bite Iran, which will make China in a better position to bargain for cheaper oil. I don't think the Chinese are afraid to oppose the US on this sanctions matter, especially as supplying China's energy needs is central to its economic growth. Russia is also displeased with the unilateral sanctions, particularly because they fall outside the framework of the Security Council. Russian cooperation is central to the success of sanctions, especially as Russia is so involved in the Iranian nuclear program. Again, like China, I don't think that Russia has a problem with going up against the US on this issue. Both China and Russia are pushing for a return to negotiations, and this really underscores the main difference of opinion between them and the US over Iran, and that is that they support Iran's right to a peaceful nuclear program.
Cosima, what about Pakistan? Pakistan and Iran have been working on the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline project. Would that be impacted by these sanctions?
Well, Pakistan, as you know, has been suffering under gas shortages, with gas stations being closed 3 days per week and even talks of 2 to 3 months of full closure of gas stations. So any hindrance to the Iran pipeline would be very problematic for Pakistan. The US has hinted that continuation of the pipeline project between Iran and Pakistan could be a violation of the recent sanctions. However, Pakistan's Foreign Minister, Hina Rabbani Khar, has countered this, saying that the US sanctions would not affect gas imports from Iran. This is a pretty significant difference of opinion, and I think this could prove a sticking point in the future. It's also been hinted at that the NATO supply line card could be played if the US became insistent upon stopping the gas pipeline project. Basically, from all aspects, Pakistan does not want to bow to pressure on the US on this point. And considering the civil unrest we've seen in Pakistan in the recent weeks over gas shortages, I don't imagine they'll be willing to discontinue the pipeline project. Rabbani Khar implied as much when she made the distinction that Pakistan was only bound by UN sanctions, not US sanctions.
Cosima, what can you tell us about the countries that are supporting the sanctions?
Well, there is, of course, the EU bloc. This is being pushed on by Britain and France. The EU is in full support of further sanctions on Iran. They are, in fact, close to an embargo on Iranian oil. Although on this, there will be some thorny issues while Italy, Greece and Spain find alternative energy supplies. However, even these countries are supportive in principle of more sanctions. The US sanctions have also served to highlight the dependence on Iranian oil in Asia. While China is Iran's largest export partner, In Asia, they also have significant dealings with Japan and South Korea, as well as India. These countries intimated that they are in support of the sanctions, although they are negotiating for waivers, I guess because the shock of a sudden energy shortage is more than any economy can sustain in these economic times. It seems, in the case of Japan and Japan and South Korea, and even India, the coercive nature of the sanctions is more at play here than the actual end game of the US sanctions. These countries are in no position at the moment to go head to head with the US, so are doing what they must to keep the US happy. Basically, the threat of being excluded from the US market is too big, so they'll support the sanctions and find alternative energy sources where they can. At this point, Turkey is in an interesting position. It's stated that it should be exempt from the sanctions because of its, I guess you could call it, its special position as a mediator between Iran and the West. Just today, the Turkish foreign minister announced that Iran was willing to renew negotiations with the so-called P5+1 group, which is basically the Western powers. And this would be staged in Ankara. So at this point, it looks like Russia and China have got their wish with return to negotiations. But for now, the sanctions will continue to bite at Iran's crucial oil revenues.
Thank you, Cosima, for reporting on the situation in Middle East and for monitoring the reaction to the sanctions imposed by US.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
It is clear that not only will Iran suffer from these sanctions, but any other country that continues to have dealing with Iran and its central bank. Furthermore, it seems like the European countries, particularly France and UK, are pushing for tougher sanctions against Iran. On the other hand, China and Russia and probably BRIC as the emerging nations would like to continue to have energy resources that they very much need to continue their economic growth. So this trend is likely to continue. Furthermore, this situation also validates PoliTact's other trend that we've been monitoring, that in different regions of the world, the security concerns are taking precedence over the benefit of economic cooperation. Just a few weeks ago, we conducted an interview with Shahid Javed Burki, and that was one of the trends that we talked to him about. And it seems to be that is also occurring in Middle East and will have an impact on South Asia as well, especially the Pakistan-Iran gas pipeline project. Cosima talked about the comments made by Pakistan's Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Khar. Just a few weeks earlier, President Zardari made a comment as well in a speech when he said that Pakistan will continue to trade and do business with any country it wants to, making probably a reference to Iran. Nonetheless, the sanctions on Iran will probably complicate and toughen the position of Pakistan, even though Hina Rabbani Khar suggested that they are not bound to follow the American sanctions, and made an emphasis that Pakistan is more likely and is under international law to follow the UN sanctions. It does not necessarily have to follow the American sanctions. We will continue to monitor this very delicate situation.